Hello, and welcome to the show Goldsquadrongays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and we're not going to have a bit at the start. We're going to start actually a little bit serious. So about an hour prior to us starting recording the episode, I found out through the Legends Con Twitter, if you remember our Ferris Olin episode, one of our guests, Catherine, who's the Legends Con executive director, she was in a near-fatal car accident. It was a head-on collision. She's got a long road to recovery ahead of her. A GoFundMe has been set up for her. She's been a long-time Star Wars fan, long-time queer advocate. She's one of the founders of Pride Squadron. So we are going to include that GoFundMe in the show notes for the next couple of episodes. And if you are financially able to, please go and donate to that GoFundMe. She's going to have a rough road ahead of her, and she could use any support that you could possibly give, or just boost the Twitter post, Instagram post, the GoFundMe, anything that would help her out. So we have to start on that very serious note. We want to do everything possible for her. Now that the serious note is past, Bradley, how are you feeling? You feeling good? You feeling tired? Are you guys?
No.
You guys aren't wrapped. As of the 18th, when we're recording this, you're not quite wrapped yet, I think.
No, I still got another week and a half-ish left. I mean, finale's next week, but we've got wrap out for another week after that. So,
and for context, Bradley works in reality TV. So he is not on strike currently. His shows are still going because they're under a different contract. Well, hopefully that's over soon because, well, Bradley, we just have this whole plethora, this world of Star Wars comics and books and possibly even video games or other pieces of media that are not the visual media that we could potentially deal with.
There's just too many Star Wars things.
There's too many Star Wars things for us to do. There's so much Star Wars. Don't even get me started. I will get you into Legends at some point. It may take me the next 5 years. But I'm going to try. We've been doing this podcast for nearly 3 years now, and I have no intention of stopping anytime soon.
There you go.
It's become too much of a core part of my identity because I have a sad, sad life. Well, Bradley, I don't think we have anything necessarily to talk about. We're going to be slow on news for a while, I think. I think not a lot's going to be happening.
Yeah, I guess until after the strikes are over, they really don't plan on doing anything.
Well, they have to stretch things out.
Right.
So,
they're going to have to hold stuff, too.
Yeah, one of the movies got quietly pushed 6 months. Everybody forgot about that, but I didn't forget about that. At least 2 of the shows have been pushed back to when they were originally. It's going to be slowed down. I was seeing a list, and there were a couple that are still slated to come out next year. Can't say which ones because I don't want to cross into promotion, but it's going to start slowing down for a little bit, which is good for me because that means we actually have time to go back and do stuff.
Right.
We're not rushing from one show to the other.
I'm curious, though. I will be curious to know, see which ones actually make the cut next year and which ones they get rid of because, they just ran out of time because they pushed everything so much. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I suspect they were planning to kind of dial back on TV anyway, was the sense I got. Because they threw a lot at TV, but I think not quite as much as Marvel did. And I think the benefit of Star Wars was they never tried to advertise it necessarily as you have to watch everything.
Right.
But I do feel like with movies starting to come out again soon, they may dial back on that TV a little bit. Or they may use it for weird little things that aren't the mainline stuff. We'll see. I can't talk too much about that because there's still a strike going on. And we support the union that's on strike currently. And the AMPTP should get back to the negotiating table fucking immediately. Bradley, do you remember our Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade episode?
I sure do.
So I listened to that episode this morning because I just recorded another podcast on Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade.
Oh.
So I listened to our episode again so that I remember what my thoughts were. So I said something else.
Gotcha.
So I didn't just repeat the same thing. That episode was recorded right after the AMPTP walked away from negotiations with the WGA.
Oh, wow.
You remember that in August? And as of this recording, the AMPTP has just walked away from negotiations with SAG-AFTRA.
Interesting.
With the same fucking deal, too. So everything I said in the stinger of that episode about how the AMPTP are a bunch of feckless, inept cowards and that they need to get the fuck back to the negotiating table, the useless bags of shit or whatever it was I said on that episode, all that still applies. It was timely that I listened to that again.
I like it.
You see, it's like poetry, Bradley. It rhymes.
All of Star Wars rhymes, so why shouldn't
All of
life,
Star
I guess?
Wars. Life is just a series of constantly repeating patterns over and over again into oblivion, into the void, until one day, eventually, the last black hole will fade away with the last tiny little bit of Hawking radiation, and the universe will be cold, dead, and empty. None of our failures or triumphs will matter, or even be remembered by the cold, unfeeling, uncaring void.
I don't know if you meant to do a segue, but the sheer fact that what your segue was talking about is the absence of light or light dying. I just feel like that is like something that is semi.
So I was actually going to try to segue into
Okay.
Darth Vader 2017. You did kind of beat me to it a little bit. Yes, if you are just joining us because of the ongoing SAG-AFTRA strike and the request from the union to not do any rewatch episodes or do any promotion, even though we kind of fall under review, we've elected to err on the side of being in support of the union. So we are not doing current visual media content, and we are not doing rewatch visual media content. Instead, we have been doing books and comics, and we have been on a journey through Star Wars Darth Vader 2017 by Charles Soule. And today, we will be covering issues number 7 through 10, Dying Light. Before we do that, though, I do have a note from our friend Hope Mullinax over on J Guys and Jedi, who contacted me after listening to our last episode because she did have the answer to a question we had. If you're joining us now, for some reason, last episode there was some speculation on, since the fact that all of these comics are made digitally, why do they have an inker? And I speculated, well, it's probably the same thing, just digital. Someone pencils, and then it comes along and inks it, and then the colorist comes in and colors in the inked. And this is directly from Hope, our friend over at J Guys and Jedi. And she says, just FYI, you are correct in your Vader episode about inkers. It is hand-drawn digitally, but most of the time the artist will send the final sketches to the inker to do the next step because it allows the process to go faster. The artist doesn't have to ink and can work on the next panels while the inker does the work of a traditional comic book inker. Now it's all digital instead of paper, but it's the same process. Very few artists are paper anymore, with the exceptions of people like Alex Ross, who just makes watercolor masterpieces. Though most comic friends I know can do the entire process from sketch to ink to final product, it's taught to them in most sequential art schools. That's why sometimes you won't see inkers noted on smaller indie titles, or artists will do it themselves and get credit for both art and inking. Thank you, Hope. My best friend actually is a sequential artist who did that major in college, and I don't know why I didn't know that information, but there we go. All right, so this week we are doing The Dying Light. A surviving Jedi undertakes a deadly mission, and Vader decides what sort of Sith he wants to be. Bradley, you want some additional information about who worked on this issue? Well,
Sure.
This art, written by Charles Soule, as is everything, penciled by Giuseppe Camuncoli. I'm going to constantly butcher this name. I am so sorry. Giuseppe Camuncoli, I think is how you pronounce this name. It was inked by Daniele Orlandini. The letterer was Joe Caramagna again, and the colorist was David Curiel. Bradley, what was one thing you liked and one thing you disliked about The Dying Light?
One thing I liked about The Dying Light was the return, I guess you could say, of Jocasta Nu into media of some kind. I liked that she was in this story as someone I actually knew who it was already. So unlike the last arc where I didn't know who the new Jedi character was, this time I did. So I didn't have to do the whole learning a new person and all that kind of extra stuff. That I just automatically knew who she was. I didn't have to think about it. The character, I knew what kind of person she was, everything about her. So that was nice. They did the legwork for me, essentially. What I didn't like was that she fucking dies. Because I literally did this again where I said, wouldn't it be interesting if Jocasta Nu was the person who saved Grogu in The Mandalorian? And you were like, yeah, I guess that would be interesting. And then I was like, well, she's dead. So that
technically she could have done it. Like, this is after Order 66.
That's
but
true.
like, yeah, I've been sitting on the knowledge that she fucking dies.
Yeah.
For a while, and it's just never. There's a whole plethora of like Star Wars information that I know that I've just never had a good chance to bring up with Bradley. So I don't think he actually knows it.
I don't, because I don't know when people die, because I haven't consumed every single piece of media, unlike some nerds, and so therefore
I haven't even consumed every piece of media.
I don't know that
there's still things that I'm missing.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't read any of the IDW stuff except for the High Republic Adventures. So I haven't read any of Hyperspace Adventures. I haven't read any of Star Wars Adventures. There's at least 2 books that I haven't read. There's a couple of the junior novels I think that I haven't read. And there's some other, like the whole Rebels comic I haven't read. There's plenty I haven't read. I know what happens in them, but there's plenty I haven't read. So trust me.
I don't like not having knowledge, like the Grand Inquisitor. I feel like the Grand Inquisitor because I am being kept from all this knowledge.
We'll get to him.
What about you?
So one thing that I really liked, I liked the implementation of Jocasta Nu in this as a contrast to the Jedi we had last time. The Jedi we had last time was all about conflict. He was just there to be a guy that Vader fights. And they make a point multiple times in this of saying Jocasta Nu is kind of a subpar combatant. She's not that good at it. Her strengths lie elsewhere and her danger lies elsewhere. And while yes, there's a big like fight that takes up 3 of the issues, 2 of the issues, 3 of the issues, however many it takes up, she's fighting much differently because she's having to fight strategically and defensively to an extent to try to escape towards the end. So I really liked her implementation as this character who is trying to outsmart Vader and the Grand Inquisitor. One thing I did not like, this is going to be a hard one because I loved most of this art. I would say if I had to pick one thing that I disliked, the final panels were very hopeful, and I'm going to talk about how much I like them. I really think they maybe should have gone later or like at the end of the entire series or somewhere else. Because it's a little weird that Luke randomly pops in and then we're back to the normal Vader stuff for the next issue. It was just a little weird to me. That's like a super nitpick. It's one of those cases where I have to super fucking nitpick something. Also, a lot of the characterization was very blink and you miss it. Like they had something really interesting set up we'll get to with the concept of unreliable narrators and how different people can have different perspectives on a situation that was blown past very quickly. And I felt like maybe a little more time with the Grand Inquisitor and Jocasta Nu just to really dig into this sort of differing angles on the situation. But for the most part, I fucking loved these issues. Incredible stuff. Mind-blowingly good stuff. Alrighty, let's get into it. Issue number 7. Vader is standing over the 6th brother who is holding his smoking fucking crevice where his arm used to be. And that's how we open. Yeah, Vader's just fucking torturing the Inquisitors. Just fucking mutilating the shit out of them to try to train them. And the Grand Inquisitor's like, hey, so I know that Palpatine said that like we're supposed to hunt Jedi, maybe we should keep all of our limbs. And Vader's like, maybe we should shut the fuck up and let me do what I want. And the Grand Inquisitor's like, oh, okay. So they go to look at this list of Jedi, and they're like, Palpatine has highlighted Jocasta's Nu's name for some reason. So Vader goes to talk to Palpatine. And Palpatine's like, yeah, you need to capture her and capture her alive. Make sure she's alive. I cannot stress this enough, Vader. Make sure she's alive. And Vader's like, yeah, okay, sure. Buddy, I will absolutely do that. Cut to Jocasta Nu in a cave. And she's like, I have been recording things for my holocron things to make my school. But there's one more thing that I need to make my school. And then she flies away. And I can't remember if she lands on Coruscant in this issue or the next one. Yeah, so Vader just sort of fucking tortures the Inquisitors. Let's not move past that very quick.
I mean, I love that I love the next, I think it's like one of the next panels after he's like there. It's like you see all the other Inquisitors like either like laying on a stretcher or like holding their limbs, and like it's like, Vader, like I get it, you're traumatized because you have like had half of your limbs cut off. However, I don't see the practicality of teaching loss to somebody by cutting off their hand or cutting off their arm, or I think in the Ninth Sister's case, he slashed her stomach or something like that. And I was like, what the fuck is the purpose other than to be like, yeah, I'm just mutilating all these people?
Well, he tries to make a point of it and be like, oh, it's because they will know true loss. They could feel it. It's like, oh, I'm sad about Padme or whatever.
Right.
No, you just suck. Like,
Yeah.
it's the warped training style of the dark side. It corrupts everything it touches. And I also think it's interesting thinking about this as like what Jocasta Nu wants to do, where she's setting up her school, and we also see the way that Vader's doing his training. I think it's really interesting to start the arc out this way, even though we're only going to see one of these Inquisitors the rest of the time. It's the one Vader's not torturing. So let's talk about this list. So they go into the office and they're bitching at each other, and Vader pulls up this list. And it's got some names on it. But there's one name in particular that's very interesting because of when this comic came out.
Okay.
So some names on this list include someone named Case Beridan, Yoda, Kurak Infilla, who we saw last arc,
Right.
Jocasta Nu, Ahsoka Tano, and interesting enough, Quinlan Voss. Yes, this was our first indication Quinlan Voss actually survived Order 66.
Okay.
This predates the Obi-Wan Kenobi show by like 4 years.
Oh.
Yes. I have no idea who Case Beridan is. Let me see really quickly if Nobody knows who this is. They're just a person that was there, according to what I can find. Anything that was not a name that we know was simply meant to be
Easter egg or some kind.
Easter egg, and not anything that actually means anything.
It's somebody's brother or sister, combination of the two or something. Yeah.
Something in there for somebody. Didn't really matter. That's what's going on with that target list. In case you were interested in who's actually on it, it's people like Yoda, Ahsoka Tano, Jocasta Nu, and Quinlan Voss.
I like that.
Which rules. And then motherfucking Jocasta Nu's here. So, if people don't remember somehow, Jocasta Nu was the chief archivist for the Jedi, and she was the person who tells Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones that if a planet is missing from the archives, it is because that planet does not exist. It's that lady. She's in like that one scene. That's it.
That's it.
But she gets a prominent role here, which is kind of cool to see. Also, very neat that she must have been in the temple during Order 66. She's clearly alive.
Yeah, now that you
because she died in Legends. Like, she was in the temple and Vader killed her. And here she's clearly managed to get out of the temple.
Right. Yeah, how did she do that?
That is an excellent question
because she would have just been in the library.
We know the answer.
She would have just been chilling in there anyway. And then when it happened, and so,
Yeah, I don't think we know. Yeah, Wikipedia just says survive the destruction of the Jedi. That's it. That's all we get.
Okay.
Nu survived the destruction of the Jedi. That's all we know. She managed to get out of the temple somehow. Good for her.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it works out for a little bit.
Yep, because she teams up with her buddy Gar. Now I looked, Gar is only in this arc of this comic. We have never seen him anywhere else.
Oh, okay. I was confused because I didn't know who he was or what
he
was
feels like somebody we should know.
Right.
We've never seen him before, and we will never see him again.
That's unfortunate. I feel like it's kind of a waste of a character then, because he's just here and then he's not at the end.
He's here and he gets his lovely little moment at the end, but yeah, it's I think it speaks to Charles Soule as a writer that he creates these characters with a lot of personality that feel like they have a lot of history, even when they actually don't. So maybe later writers can come in and fill that history in later, like certain characters who we will get to in later arcs. That was a tease. I am teasing future content. I am trying to get people to continue to listen to the show.
Oh, okay.
See, that's my cunning plan here, Bradley.
I like it. Okay.
So, we have a scene where the Grand Inquisitor and Vader are talking, and Grand Inquisitor is like, yeah, Jocasta Nu was so smug. She never let me in the archives. She was always looking down on me. I think she actually liked telling me that I couldn't go in and read the dark side stuff. Yeah, she hated me so much. Pause. The Grand Inquisitor is a very unreliable narrator here. We all get that, right?
Explain.
The Grand Inquisitor,
other than he's just giving an opinion, but like
he's nursing a grudge. He's clearly nursing a grudge. Well, because I get people that are like, oh, the Grand Inquisitor just wanted to read books. And I'm like, yeah, that's accurate, kind of. But his version of the story doesn't conflict, like, in facts with Jocasta's version. The Grand Inquisitor's version is super tainted by his hatred for this woman that told him he couldn't have access to the back room of the Blockbuster because he was 13. Come back when you're 18 and have a government-issued ID and I'll let you in. Right. And he's like, man, that manager was just so loved telling me no. When in reality, the manager probably didn't even think about it. Probably which completely forgot you. A little bit later. Which we do find out later was actually what happened. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, it might be accurate to say, and here's the thing too about the dark side and like giving in to your negative emotions and things like that. It can color the way you talk about people and the way you talk about events. Because the Grand Inquisitor is being encouraged to tap into all these negative feelings. And so retroactively, he is making it worse than it was, I suspect, is what's going on here. I'm sure he probably wanted to go in and read the Dark Side books. And I'm sure he was probably very upset when he was told no. She probably did not be mean to him about it.
No,
like,
of course not.
This way he's describing of, she I think just liked lording it over people. If you weren't in her chosen elite, you didn't get access. And I'm like, I don't know if that's accurate. You're ascribing a lot of malice to this woman. Like,
yeah, who probably didn't even have that much access herself, if you think about it. Because I mean, yeah, she was in charge of.
Well, she was the chief archivist, so she had access to everything.
Right, but she didn't have access to necessarily read it all.
Well, she also had the wisdom not to, was the thing.
Right.
So she was the chief archivist. She technically could read all of it if she wanted to. She was a master. She could go in and do that. She had the wisdom not to want to do that. And there's a complicated thing where, like, the Jedi... How do I phrase this? There's a complicated thing where the pursuit of knowledge in and of itself is not a bad thing. The problem is that some of the knowledge that exists of the Force can be very tempting and lead you to a dark place. Right. And if you don't have the emotional maturity or the training or any of that to resist that temptation, you could wind up doing a lot of damage to yourself or wind up doing a lot of damage to other people. And part of the job of the chief archivist is to make sure when you have a bunch of like magic space wizards who can blow things up with their mind, that these people are not going in and accessing stuff that they're not emotionally and mentally prepared for. And the Grand Inquisitor may have believed that he deserved access to this knowledge, but clearly she looked at him and went, no, you're not ready for it. And she says later on, not to jump ahead, she's like, I denied countless requests that were like this because it's my job. My job is to assess people who want to access this knowledge, whether or not they are capable of having it. It's interesting to look at the way the Grand Inquisitor is talking about Jocasta here. Because I don't think he's lying. I just think he's unreliable in narrating the situation that occurred.
It's a very one-sided view of what's happening.
Yeah, and it all goes back to just the dark side corrupting. It's literally corrupting his perception of this situation. And you know Palpatine got in there after reading Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade. You know that's how Palpatine did it. That he got in there and was like, oh, well, they're denying it to you because they're elitist. They are denying it to you because they believe that they are the arbiters of this knowledge. And it's like, I mean, kind of, but also it's actually legitimately dangerous stuff. Like you need to know how to do it properly.
Right. It's not like, oh, I was keeping this from you just because. It's like there's literally proven fact of people who have literally like touched objects and then been like turned like evil or sick or something.
Not to jump ahead, one of the things in the dark side area that we will eventually see is the Mask of Lord Momin. Like, we will get to what that is in a minute, but it's stuff like that.
Right.
It's text like how to make that, how he did it, like the kind of stuff that the Sith were doing, which again, not to jump ahead to a future arc, was some really messed up stuff that they actually were capable of doing with the Force. So, I don't know. I think this scene is interesting. I feel a little bit of sympathy for the Grand Inquisitor, but I also recognize that his perception of it has been extremely warped.
Right.
And that he also, like, clearly he wanted to think the worst of Jocasta. This comic moves at a mile a minute, and there's so much here. Oh, also, Jocasta Nu lands on Coruscant and then breaks into the Jedi Temple. That's actually the end of the issue. I just messed that up. It was a thing Charles fucked up in real time. There we go, into the issue. She's breaking into the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Yay. Issue number 8. Overview. Jocasta Nu has broken into the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. She is hunting for a list of Force-sensitive children. We will eventually see something very similar to this later on. Meanwhile, her ship is in the hangar, and it gets discovered by the Coruscant police, and the droid blows it up. And she goes into the temple. She gets the list of the things. Vader sends the Grand Inquisitor to go read books. Jocasta sees him reading the books, and she makes it in, and she makes it out, and then she decides to, like, jump off the thing and confront the Grand Inquisitor. Is that where it ends? Did I get it right this time?
You got it right.
Okay. There we go. We open with Vader force choking a because
As he always loves to do.
As he loves to do. Well, I had a little process with my notes on this one.
Okay.
Because my first note was going to bitch about this. Because Force Unleashed did something like this. The opening of the game is Vader lands on Kashyyyk. There's some officer. The officer says something and Vader just starts choking him. Because I guess it's not the news that Vader wanted.
Of course.
And I've always thought that was dumb. I always thought that the way I read Empire Strikes Back, the way that I read this movie, and also A New Hope to a lesser extent, Vader doesn't, like, choking people isn't his first reaction to any sort of negative news or anything he disagrees with. It's the really bad stuff, like, I brought the fleet out of hyperspace too close to the system, or I lost the Millennium Falcon and I'm going to apologize, or I'm being a little mean to Vader in a meeting. Like, it's not like everything. That was my first note. Then Palpatine basically says what I'm thinking, which is, hey buddy, you cannot be doing that.
Right.
Every single time somebody says something you don't like. What the fuck, man?
No, I love how he's like, listen, Vader, you can't choke everybody because everybody around us is just a fucking moron. They're lesser beings than us. So we literally they can't help it. They're so dumb. Like, don't worry too much about it. Don't read into it too much that everybody fucking sucks because they literally are lesser than us.
Also, like, dude, if you kill everybody, we're not going to have an empire to rule over.
Yeah, that also. Please don't kill everybody.
Please don't kill everybody in the empire. We need them to be an empire.
Right.
It's kind of boring if it's just us. So I ended up loving that scene quite a great deal more than I did when I started reading it. Because it's Charles Soule taking these concepts and, like, really playing with them. Like, this is what he does as a writer. He wrote one of the big issues of Marvel recently. I don't know if it was like a 100th issue anniversary or something, but he wrote a comic that was all about why the Jedi use lightsabers. And the whole comic is this exploration. It's Obi-Wan and Anakin fighting, and Obi-Wan's basically teaching Anakin, why don't we have, like, light nunchucks? Why don't we have, like, a light battle axe? And he explains the rationale behind the lightsaber. Charles Soule clearly loves doing this, like taking little things. And then this is taking the Vader's habit of force choking everyone and really diving down to why wouldn't he just force choke everyone that looks at him funny? It's for this reason.
Right.
It's because he's learning to deploy it at special moments. And we will see later on that he will get a lot more out of not choking a guy when he clearly wants to. But I did end up loving it. I love every time Vader and Palpatine talk in this series. Charles Soule fucking nails Palpatine every time. We get to see Coruscant police.
Who are also just a bunch of inept dudes who want to be here.
Yes, so rather like the actual police, they blunder into the situation without fully understanding or analyzing it. And then bad things happen. Specifically, the droid blows up the ship with... Did you catch what the explosion was?
It's the ship?
Yeah, what actually exploded?
Oh, the engine?
Specifically, what part of the engine?
I don't know, I'm not a mechanic. Okay, I'm like,
the fuel. It was Rhydonium. That was a rhydonium explosion.
Interesting.
You may remember rhydonium from some of the visual media, which we actually covered pretty recently. It's very fucking explosive. So that was cool. We get our first look at Vader meditating, what that looks like in the Force.
Okay, that we need to talk about that because
we need to talk about that.
The fuck is that?
Vader, how he sees himself in the Force. With his, like, the part of his body that's body is, like, red and swirling and dark. And then the mechanical stuff is, like, this blue. But it's also, like, there's still a balance between light and dark in there. And there's also the, like, little butterfly. Pay attention to that. That'll come up again later. Okay. But it's, like, what he sees, what he's experiencing when he's meditating. The shit's crazy.
Yeah, it's, like, psychedelic, weird depression. It's like so weird. I like it.
I do love it. Pay attention to it. It will come up again at another point later on in the series. So that's cool. Vader gets interrupted and it's basically like, hey, FYI, there was an incident. Jocasta Nu breaks in. I mentioned it before. I'm going to mention here. You can see the Mask of Momin in this in in one of the display cases. Bradley, you don't know what that means yet, okay, but you will. Also, the Force-sensitive children, the list of Force-sensitive children, if that sounds familiar, this predates Fallen Order, but Fallen Order has the exact same MacGuffin, list of Force-sensitive children, which I believe, what's his bucket in, Cordova gets from Jocasta Nu. I believe that's where he gets the list of Force-sensitive children that he's hiding on Bogano. None of these words mean anything to Bradley.
I don't. You're basically speaking another language, even though I know you're speaking Star Wars. It's a different dialect that I'm not used to.
I know you're speaking Star Wars. It's like, so my boyfriend speaks not fluent, but conversational French. And when he gets annoyed, or he gets annoyed at me in particular, he will lapse into French because he knows it annoys me to not understand what he's saying. Except now we've gotten to a point where I can kind of sort of understand what he's saying, but I couldn't identify any of the words for you. I just can kind of pick it up. I think that's what it must be like when I start going off on a Star Wars thing that Bradley hasn't read or played. Shout out to the scene of Vader not choking the dude and also putting the Jedi Starfighter back together with the Force because he recognizes it.
Cool. I was like, you know what? I know they're never going to do this, but like, if they ever end up doing some kind of Sherlock Holmes-esque Star Wars thing, I want to see a Force-sensitive Sherlock Holmes person be like, no, look, I can put the whole explosion back together so you can see what it actually looked like. Like, that's such a cool concept.
They have some, like, technology and stuff that can clearly do that, but the idea that Vader looks at all this wreckage and is like, that is a Jedi Starfighter, and then reassembles it with the Force,
right? Like,
putting it together, the level of knowledge he has to have of Jedi Starfighters is insane. I just want to shout out that scene because I fucking love that scene. End of this issue. So Jocasta Nu is trying to leave, and she walks by the Grand Inquisitor several times. He does not notice her, and she's like, get in, get out, get in, get out, get in, get out. Do not get pissed at this. Fuck it. At the end. Her fatal flaw is, the Grand Inquisitor, we talked about how his perception of her is warped. Her fatal flaw is actually pride. It is a running
theme in the Jedi Order.
Yes, at this point. Because she cannot let this sacrilege to her books go. She cannot do it.
And I don't know if I agree with that characterization of her too, because it's like, it's so annoying that like she's so gung-ho about, I gotta get this list of kids. It's very important that I get this list. Like, if it falls into the wrong hands, kind of thing, mentality. I have it. I'm getting away with it. I'm almost out, and then she just can't help herself, and she just has to confront him. And I'm like, why would you do that?
The thing about having a fatal flaw that's rooted in some sort of emotion, particularly if you've spent your whole life suppressing emotions and you don't really know how to let them wash over you, like, say, for example, you've lost the correct ideal of attachment and not having attachments to things. But if you have a fatal flaw that's emotion-based, you really only need one moment of fucking up. You really just need one moment where it becomes a little too much to bear, and then the next thing you know, you're jumping down on a table and whacking the Grand Inquisitor with a lightsaber. And that's the thing about her is she clearly knows she has to get out, but she just can't help it, and in a split-second decision is like, nope, gotta do something.
And didn't I want to say, didn't Palpatine even say it in the early? It's either in early in this episode in this issue or the one before where he was like, "Yeah, she'll do something to fuck up and like reveal herself because she just can't help herself."
Yep.
I'm pretty sure he says something along those lines, like,
Mhm.
which is again something we've seen in media before, where they're like, the Jedi can't fucking help themselves. They have to help people. They have to go out of their way to make themselves
Their
known.
compassion is a weakness,
Right.
and we will see the Inquisitors use this later on in other media. Their compassion is a weakness. We see it in the High Republic, the use of the Jedi's compassion against them, with the tortures of Loden Greatstorm and everything, all of that happens. So, yeah, it's interesting that she has this moment, and on first glance, it seems weird, but it really is indicative, too, of also her inability as a Jedi to be in this situation that's not something that she was ever expected to be in. That she doesn't have the training, and she doesn't, even her in her age and her mastery, she doesn't have the necessary training or experiences to properly deal with this. Next issue, there's some fighting. Lots of fighting happens. Vader, the Grand Inquisitor, almost kills Jocasta, but Darth Vader intervenes. And Darth Vader and the Grand Inquisitor argue, because the Inquisitor is like, wait, why should I not kill Jedi? And Vader's like, why should you not shut the fuck up and do what I tell you? But it's too late. Jocasta Nu has run off and found a fucking Jedi laser rifle thing that she used to shoot at Vader. And that is broadly the plot of this issue.
Yep, this is a pretty quick one.
The clone trooper that we see at the temple, the one who is later killed by Vader for fucking up, that is Commander Fox. We have seen Commander Fox before in some of the visual media.
Oh, I liked his character design. I just thought that was like a fun, like kind of beta Captain Cardinal. So I thought it was like a nice looking.
Yeah, you can see where it was drawing inspiration too from the Red Guards, and it eventually, like, you can tell where the Coruscant Guard would eventually become like. You know what it also really reminded me of? The Sith Eternal troopers. The Final Order troopers.
Yes. Yeah.
From Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. Well, because it's got the similar, like, I guess their breathing apparatus thing on the bottom of the helmet or something. Like, I don't know. It's a similar shape, or like a more visually similar to the First Order stuff than the OG stormtroopers. So
it's very interesting. Like him a lot. Too bad he's not going to survive. So ding on the I really like this character. I hope he survives this counter that I shamelessly borrowed from Darkside Divas. Yeah, he's not making it out of this arc. What's really interesting to me, because I listened to our Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade episode, and then I read these issues to do my notes. And you can kind of see the bones of what's going to become Iskat Akaris' story in the Grand Inquisitor in this issue.
Right.
And the way that he talks to Jocasta, the way that he's like, it's a very tragic situation, kind of, but also like he's clearly like holding on to this anger and holding on to this hatred, and it's poisoning him from the inside out. And you can kind of see this is going to be a thing for Inquisitors. We're going to see a lot of Inquisitors do this. Certain other Inquisitors we're also going to see do this. I think this is a really interesting characterization for him. You know what else I think is really interesting? The difference between the Grand Inquisitor and Vader and how they approach situations. Because the Inquisitors are what we think of Sith to be like. They're just raw violence. That's their solution, raw violence. Vader's much more mechanically cold in this issue. Like, he's much more methodical. He's much more, I don't want to say restrained, but he's much more deliberate in his actions. And the Grand Inquisitor is just like going ham. I thought that was interesting. I thought that was an interesting comparison between the two.
Yeah, it's because literally Vader knows what the actual plan is, right? Like, because he knows 100% of the plan, versus the Inquisitor who only knows 15% of the plan, because that's the way Palpatine designed this whole entire thing, is to always pit everybody against each other and don't give everybody all the information and just see what
God damn it, happens. Palpatine. Yeah, because he's kind of forcing Vader into a situation where Vader has to be the reasonable one, has to go against his own people. to step in and assert. And if we remember all the way back to the beginning of issue 7, when they had this whole conversation and Vader's like, you guys are pathetic, you are stupid, you are weak. Just do what I tell you at all times. I don't give a fuck what anybody tells you. Just do what I tell you. And we're seeing that come to blows here, literally come to blows here, where the Inquisitor's straining to kill this woman, and Vader's like, no. And the conflict between them is what lets Jocasta Nu get her sick-ass lightsaber rifle.
Don't skip over the whole Vader going after the robot and the robot recognizing him.
Yeah, the robot recognizes him as Anakin Skywalker, and Jocasta Nu's like, fuck.
Right.
She's
like, of fucking course it's this kid. Like... Oh
shit. God damn it. Okay. Let me get the fuck out of here.
Right. And then she grabs the rifle. And we're like, yes. Okay, I need to talk about it we'll probably talk about it more in the next issue, but we can kind of talk about it.
We can talk about it now. We can talk about the lightsaber rifle now.
What the actual fuck is this? I didn't quite get it at first because I didn't notice her lightsaber was actually inside of the rifle at first, and until the next issue when we see it melted or whatever. But I didn't realize you have to insert your lightsaber into it, and then it uses it like a fucking battery. And lasers people. I mean, what? Who the fuck invented this? It's that's not a Jedi thing.
We don't know a lot about it. It's only appeared 3 places. Here, The Rise of Kylo Ren, and in The Light of the Jedi, High Republic Light of the Jedi. Those are the only places that this has been mentioned. And I don't even know what the mention was in Light of the Jedi. I genuinely cannot remember it, and the Wikipedia page does not provide any additional details. Just that apparently it's in there, but there's a lightsaber rifle. Apparently the way it works is you insert the lightsaber in, and it can fire 5 shots off of that, and then it melts the lightsaber beyond use. So it's a very Jedi rifle in 2 ways. Firstly, you have to give up your lightsaber in order to use it. Second is you only get a limited number of shots.
So don't miss.
So don't miss and don't waste them. Don't be frivolous. Do not fire this unless it's absolutely necessary. Because I first saw this in the issue and I was like, that's so fucking dumb.
Right, doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. And then I thought about it, I was like, no, it's very in line with the lightsaber. This is a weapon. Sometimes we have no choice but to use a weapon. We have to be smart and we have to use it as little as possible. And if we use it, there's going to be consequences. So it really is a very Jedi weapon in its implementation. Bravo to Charles Soule for making a gun that's Jedi.
I love it.
I didn't think that was possible, but here we are.
The last thing, I don't want to gloss over it too much, but she deletes all the Jedi archives.
Yes! Yeah, that was not in my notes, but I forgot to write it down. Yeah, she deletes the whole archive.
Which good for her. I mean, if she couldn't let go of the Inquisitor reading one fucking book and she had to confront him, at least she could delete the entire library of the Jedi knowledge in one sitting.
What she did with that, the sacrifice that had to be for her.
Right.
That she spent her entire life curating this knowledge and made the choice to delete it because she accepted that it needed to be out of the hands of the Sith and the Inquisitorius. They could not have access to this knowledge. And I think it speaks to her faith as well. Her faith in the future of the Jedi. We find out there's another quote from another Charles Soule comic. It might have been that milestone issue that talks about that the Jedi have not always been this galaxy-spanning organization. It's mentioned that the Jedi have gone through cycles, and this was true even in Legends as well, where sometimes they've been huge, sometimes they've been just a handful of people. Sometimes they've been warriors fighting against Darkseid, sometimes they've been teachers exclusively. It's morphed and it's changed. She makes a couple of points in here about how the Force is gonna bring them back. The Force is going to correct the balance. It's gonna correct itself. That the dark side cannot be triumphant forever. And she has that faith, and because of that, she makes this sacrifice to make sure that people aren't hurt as a result of the knowledge that was in this archive, preventing the Sith from using it. The Sith would have used it as a weapon. Somebody like the Grand Inquisitor would have used it as a weapon. It was not knowledge for knowledge's sake. It was knowledge for utility. Vader tells the Grand Inquisitor, like when he goes in to read the books, Vader's like, go find what you need. Go find the information that you need. And that's what was going to happen. And so when she deletes this, it spares potentially billions of lives when she does this. So yes, we can absolutely not gloss over that. Issue number 10, Dying Light, Part 4. They fight. The clone troopers move around to try to intercept, but because Commander Fox didn't bother to tell them that Vader had a lightsaber, they assume that the guy with the lightsaber is a Jedi and start firing on him. Like, obviously, what did you think was going to happen? Jocasta Nu's trying to escape. Vader's like, hey, Fox, what the fuck? Fox is like, oh, damn, I'm sorry, dude. And Vader's like, oh, damn, I'm sorry, too, and fucking kills him. And Jocasta Nu tries to escape, but gets captured, and then she tries to jump off a building, and Vader, like, grabs her and pulls her back on. So then she's, like, on the ship with them, and she correctly identifies him as Anakin Skywalker, so he has to kill everybody on the ship. And he's like, you fucking knew that was going to happen. And she's like, okay, well, what are you going to do with me now? You have the list of Force-sensitive children, which also he got the list of Force-sensitive children when they searched her. And then he kills her. And Palpatine calls, FaceTimes him, doesn't FaceTime him actually, just puts him on speakerphone because Palpatine can't be fucking bothered. And he's like, hey buddy, so you got her alive, right? And Vader's like, nah, she died. It's unfortunate. And Palpatine's like, damn, well, did you get anything from her? And Vader holds up the list of Force-sensitive children and is like, and crushes it. Meanwhile, back in Jocasta Nu's secret hideout, Gar just hangs out for decades. Grows old, and when he's too old to protect the holocrons, he blows up the entrance to the cave, killing himself in the blast, and it remains undisturbed until Luke Skywalker shows up many years later. End of the Dying Light. Okay, so the clone-friendly firing thing.
I know they're not dumb, but I guess if they have any knowledge of Jedi beforehand, which they do because they all worked with the Jedi, they've never seen a red lightsaber before other than Dooku or Asajj Ventress, right? Because that would theoretically, if they had even seen those two people. Here's
the key too. None of the ones that are around here, and they specify, have actually seen Vader.
Wow, yeah.
So they don't know Vader on sight. If Vader had turned up, even just with a lightsaber, they would have known to not shoot him. But because Vader's such an enigma at this point, Fox didn't tell them what he looks like. So they just know there's this guy that's shown up with a lightsaber. And Fox is like, shit, fuck, stop shooting him. It's worth noting, again, there's a little hand waving you have to do with this. I know that visual media has established that clones go into like a fugue state. And that is going to come up again a little bit later. Here, Fox is able to, like, successfully tell them that he's not a Jedi, which is a little in retrospect, but it still kind of works.
Explain.
So, the way that certain visual media depicted the Order 66 and, like, these shoot Jedi on sight, remember how we were talking about in issue 2 or 3, how the clones are a little bit different in this?
Oh, yeah.
You remember how in the visual media they were basically like robots after the chips activated?
Right. I guess my headcanon is just that after Order 66 is over, they just kind of like, it stops working. And then they just kind of whatever.
It's interesting because I think this is going to come up later, that they see Jedi and start firing. I just think it's interesting that they're able to process cognitively to stop.
Got it. Okay.
Because in visual media, some people try a similar tactic to say, technically this Force user is not a Jedi. Doesn't matter. They have special orders to shoot that person.
Right, because they can't really tell the difference, or they don't know the difference. Yeah.
We're being vague because I'm trying desperately not to make direct references to the visual media, but this is a thing we've seen. Yeah, so I just think it's interesting. The way the clones are written in this prior to the Bad Batch coming out, it's interesting to me. And there's a little bit of hand-waving you have to do. We'll see. There's a scene that's coming up later on that's going to be, We'll see. We'll see when we get there. Because
Yeah.
I have vague recollections of this scene. We're going to see how it's handled in this context. Also, I love Jocasta getting all of the clones killed by being like, yeah, hi, Anakin Skywalker. And Vader's like, God damn it.
He's like, like you said, he's like, you knew this was going to fucking happen.
You knew this was going to fucking happen.
But I wonder, did she genuinely know that was going to happen, and she's doing this on purpose because the clones are traitors and she's kind of getting back at them? Or is she like she's just being truthful because she doesn't care?
I think it's more she doesn't care. I think she's trying to hit him where it hurts. Gotcha. And in killing all of the clones, he confirmed what she already knew. He confirmed that he was, in fact, Anakin Skywalker. I think that's interesting. I like that scene. And we also see Vader kills her. So this whole issue, this whole arc, Palpatine's been like, I need her alive. Get her to me alive. And Vader has just been doing everything Palpatine says. This is one of the first times Vader decides to go rogue and do his own thing. Because he kills her, which is a blow to Palpatine, and then destroys the list, which is a blow to Palpatine. And so in that moment, I think we are seeing one of the inherent flaws in the ideology of the Sith, which is it's inherently selfish and encourages selfishness. Vader doesn't care about this list of Force-sensitive children. They're not Jedi. They're not a threat to him. Right. Palpatine wants it because he wants to corrupt them. He wants to make more Inquisitors. He wants to replace Vader. And Vader's like, oh, yeah, I see what's going on here. It would benefit the Sith as a whole for you to have this list. It benefits me personally for you to not have it. Right. So I'm going to destroy it and kill Jocasta Nu.
Yeah, because they've already established in canon that, like, if you just don't harness your abilities or whatever, they just kind of fade away over time. So in Vader's thought process, he's just thinking, well, if we never find these kids, then they'll get too old and then they won't be a threat ever because they'd never harness their abilities. So it's not even worth looking for them. I think it's actually more, I would say maybe it's more that Palpatine can't replace Vader with any of these kids. Palpatine can't build his own little Force-sensitive army. He can't build his own giant 100 Inquisitor rank thing to replace Vader. There is no replacing Vader. And we haven't read together the 2015 Vader run. This is very the 2015 Vader run. Palpatine is constantly trying to replace Vader. He's constantly trying to screw him over and find somebody that's going to be better than him. And we see here right from the beginning, Vader is not going to let that happen. And that's part of the way the Sith operate, is it's inherently selfish. It encourages you to screw each other over. And that ultimately is a weakness of it. And I think it's interesting. The choice Vader makes at the end of this is extremely interesting to me and sets up a lot of who he's going to be in his relationship to Palpatine, who he's going to be through a lot of the Vader 2015 run, through a lot of the rest of this run, particularly when we get to Fortress Vader and the absolutely batshit insane things that happen in Fortress Vader. It's a fascinating character choice for this character. Okay, let's talk about that ending. Yeah, I only have one qualm with that ending. My thing is, well, I guess my biggest problem with the ending is that, one, I knew it was Luke, but I didn't know it was Luke. Like, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, he's weirdly drawn in this. Yeah, his face is really weird. I think the art is a choice, and maybe it's just that's why I wasn't like 100% sure it was Luke. Like, I mean, obviously the hair is supposed to be the giveaway, but like I also, and the yellow maybe, but I'm like, the yellow jacket. He's wearing the yellow jacket. I'm like, I don't really know if this counts. Like, if this literally could just be anything. Honestly, you could have made this anybody. I don't know. I also don't think it needed to be on here. I think it would have served better later in the series or at the end, to be honest. Yeah. And I don't remember what the last few panels of this entire run are. I get what the ending is trying to do. The ending is trying to reaffirm Jocasta's faith. It's trying to show us that her faith was well placed, that one day the Jedi would rise again, right? That somebody would rebuild the Jedi Order, that it would come back in some form. Ironically, Luke's not gonna do that actually successfully. Right. Sorry to this comic, because this came out in 2017. Yeah, Last Jedi hadn't even come out yet. So we knew that The Force Awakens had come out. We knew that was gonna happen, but we didn't know what was gonna happen in Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker when this came out. So I kind of get what they were trying to do. Where they were trying to be like, oh, there's hope for the future. The Jedi will return. Luke Skywalker is this embodiment of the Return of the Jedi. Almost like they had a movie called The Return of the Jedi about Luke becoming a Jedi and bringing the Jedi back. But it lands weirdly now.
I
mean, I think it still works in that
it
because
works.
he
It's
started his
just a
little
little
academy
weird.
or whatever. So I think it works in a sense because he clearly, if I mean, not knowing anything else that happens in this comic or just taking it at face value, you
Yes,
could.
Bradley's reading as we go. I've read the entire thing.
I mean, just face value, like you can be like, oh, he found this little space where Jocasta hid all this knowledge. He takes it and uses it for his little school that he starts. That's about all I get from it. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it works. It's one of those things that works. It works kind of in isolation. And one of the things I really like about Darth Vader 2017 and why I pitched it for our comics episodes is that it stands in isolation. It's a nice moment. Putting it in the broader span of the history of the galaxy far, far away, it rings weird. I think just because we didn't know what was going to happen in Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker yet. Honestly, I have a spicy take. I have a hot take. I have a take that would be hot enough that I probably could not eat it and would have to order something else off the menu. You want to know my hot take, Bradley?
Sure.
You know who I think would have worked a lot better for this moment? Rey.
Interesting.
I think Rey would have worked a lot better for this moment.
If they had put her in the end right here.
If she had been in the end, which she couldn't, obviously that couldn't happen because The Rise of Skywalker was still Duel of the Fates and a completely different movie.
Right.
But looking back on it in hindsight, that would have landed a lot harder for me. And it's weird to say that Rey would have landed harder than Luke in this moment, but I think she kind of would have. That's my hot take on the end of this issue.
That was pretty spicy. And
that was a spicy thing to chew on for the end. And now everyone who made it this far is going to get mad at me on Twitter.
Right.
But before we get to where you can get mad at me on Twitter, Bradley, final thoughts on The Dying Light.
Final thoughts. I loved the light that died. I thought that, Jocasta New's dying light didn't really die, but it was kind of like a nice, I don't know. I obviously we don't have any other really media of her other than just the little bit that she's in the movies. So it's nice that I don't know, nice to give her like something to do. And I liked what she did. I thought it was a really nice character moment. I didn't love her choice of being like, I love books and I'm going to risk my whole entire life and future and everything on a book. But other than that, I mean, it makes sense for her character. I just didn't like it. But other than that, I love love the Grand Inquisitor. I love that whole aspect of him and her rivalry of like his one-sided rivalry with her, that she doesn't even remember who he is. Like, she's like, dude, I have like literally billions of kids have come to my library. Like, you think I'm going to remember one fucking kid? Like, I loved it. But overall, I thought it was better than the first arc so far.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think all of these arcs are bangers, if I'm remembering correctly. At least I don't really remember what happens in the Rule of Five. We're gonna have to get there when we get there very shortly. But I do remember all of them being bangers. Like, I loved reading this comic. My final thought on the issue is that it's really good. It's just really good. I have said everything I need to say. I love how Jocasta is emblematic of the fatal pride of the Jedi, while at the same time embodying sort of the dying hope of rebuilding the Jedi Order as it once was, while also setting in motion, in a small way, the birth of a new direction for the Jedi. I think is a really interesting thing to do with her character. She's been so underused in all of media, so I'm delighted to see her. I love that the backstory is not spelled out. The exposition fairy does not show up to tell us the Grand Inquisitor's backstory. We get it piecemeal through him as somebody we can't really trust to give us an unbiased account. So I love that. Love the relationship between Palpatine and Vader. Love that Vader actually went on a character journey in this one. Love how he went from torturing the Inquisitors to getting his lesson from Palpatine to putting the lesson into practice in the hangar bay, and then being challenged with the lesson by the Grand Inquisitor, and then finally making his own choice to kill Jocasta and destroy the list of Force-sensitive children, completing a narrative arc for him over the course of the issues. The first arc, I didn't feel like he had that much of a character journey. This one, I felt like he went through a lot. Vader felt different to me at the end of this than he did at the beginning, and I absolutely adore that. So, next week on Goldsquadrongays, if things go according to plan, which they might, Bradley will not be here again. I will be doing something else for our spooky Halloween spectacular. It is not I was going to make a joke there, but it would have referenced a piece of Struck Media. I'm not going to do that whenever I can avoid doing it. So we're going to have a spooky Halloween thing that I'm trying to put together. Then after that, we will be back, regardless of what happens with the SAG-AFTRA strike. We will be back to do more Darth Vader. We are going to finish this comic series. So next up, after next week, we will be covering only 2 issues, Bradley.
Oh,
only 2.
Love that.
2 of them. We will be covering The Rule of 5 Part 1 and The Rule of 5 Part 2, issues 11 and 12. Friendly reminder, you can find all of these on Marvel Unlimited. $9.99 a month gets you access to 8 years of Star Wars comics. So if you want to follow along with us, that is where you can read them. Bradley, why don't you run our socials so we can all go to bed?
Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze. Did Charles fuck something up? Send us a message at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at Gold Squad Gaze. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Gold Squadron Gaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post the podcast as well as exclusive content. Please join us next week and every week for more of Gold Squadron Gaze.
And so when Palpatine was like being a messy gay queen and was like, now, honey, here's another margarita. Tell me all about how mean your manager is. That's how Palpatine did it.